Brooke once again gave Raymond a scandal, and as usual, it was about money. Raymond earned good money, but Brooke always needed more. At first, Raymond tried to calm her down, but then he suddenly became completely angry. "What's wrong with you? I make enough money and I don't understand what you spend it on," shouted Raymond. "Your business is to earn, and mine is to spend the money for the good of the family." "Family? You only live for yourself, Brooke. You know what? I'll probably stop giving you money at all. We never had any children while you were living for yourself. I'm sick of it all. Do you understand?" yelled Raymond and went out of the house, slamming the door loudly. Brooke was stunned. She looked after her husband in amazement, because before, he'd never allowed himself such a thing. Raymond got into the car and thought for a while. He finally realized that he regretted marrying Brooke for 23 years, and he could not find the strength to break up. Brooke was Mary's friend. When he first saw Mary, he immediately fell in love and could not believe how it could happen to him, because he'd always been a serious and sensible man. It happened when Raymond was supposed to send a parcel. He went to the post office and saw her there. When the post office had closed, he was already waiting for Mary outside, clutching a modest bouquet of flowers in his hands. On the first day, Raymond said they should get married, but Mary laughed and replied that they needed to date at least a couple of months for propriety. Raymond didn't want to wait long, but he agreed. A month passed, and then Mary's friend Brooke arrived from her studies. Despite the fact that she was much more attractive than Mary, Raymond did not like her immediately, probably because of her heavy and appraising look. But it happened that Brooke had her eye on Raymond and began to follow him everywhere. Soon, drunk at some party, Raymond woke up because of Mary screaming. He was completely naked and in bed with Brooke. It was the end. Mary did not forgive him. Out of spite, Raymond married Brooke, just as she had wanted. Now Raymond was working at a construction site as a foreman and got quite a good salary, but Brooke constantly demanded more. So Raymond got a part-time job as a cab driver, but not out of a desire to make more money, but to see his wife less often. And he liked his part-time job, new people, each with their own story, so he wasn't bored. Raymond shivered from the cold and the memories. Today it was particularly frosty, which meant that there would be a lot of work, and it pleased him. The orders started right away, and Raymond moved on. People were frozen but cheerful. It was clear that Christmas and New Year's Eve were coming. Raymond was glad to relax at last, to talk and laugh, because that was impossible at home with Brooke. He decided to stop, take a break, and have some coffee. He had a lot of work ahead of him. He remembered his recent conversation with his wife again and thought that no matter how much he earned, she would never have enough. To have at least some savings, Raymond immediately began saving some money in a separate account as soon as he began to work in the taxi part-time. Brooke did not know about this money, and a good amount had already accumulated there in 2 years. "Excuse me, you're a cab driver, aren't you?" heard Raymond and turned around. In front of him stood a young man in military uniform. Raymond nodded and the young man continued. "How much would it cost to get to the station? I've been released for 3 days. I'm short of money. And besides, I need to buy flowers. Today's my mom's birthday." Raymond smiled. "Okay, sit down. We'll deal with it." The guy smiled too. The trip should have taken half an hour, and Raymond decided that he would lose time, but it would be a joy for the boy's mother. On the way, they stopped at a flower store, and the guy bought a modest bouquet of chrysanthemums for her. When they drove up to the house, the mother immediately ran out to meet him. She cried and hugged her son. The guy bent down to Raymond, held out the money and said in a whisper, "Here's the fee. I'm sorry, I don't have any more." "No need. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas," smiled Raymond and drove back. Though he earned nothing, he felt warm in his heart. It was snowing and Raymond tried to drive slower. Suddenly, he saw something dark at the edge of the road. He slowed down and shone his headlights. Something moved and stood on its feet. When something turned around, Raymond gasped. It was a young woman, and she was pregnant. Raymond jumped out of the car. "Get in the car! Are you out of your mind?" The young woman, struggling to move her frozen feet, walked over to the car and got in. "Thank you. I thought I'd get some rest and go on my way. The bus broke down and wouldn't turn off into the village, so it dropped me off here. I still have 7 kilometers to go." Raymond was indignant, but the woman hastened to explain that it was not the driver's fault. He offered to take her back to town, but she refused. The broken bus was going very slowly. She did not want to lose time. Besides, she had no one in town, and a cat was waiting at home in the village. "Show me where to take you. And where's your husband looking? Why did he let you go alone?" As it turned out, the woman didn't have a husband. She was dating a guy, but he suddenly disappeared when he found out she was pregnant. She had no parents either. She never knew her father, and as her mother explained, he never knew about her either. The girl's mother died 2 years ago of pneumonia. When they arrived, the young woman said, "This is my house. By the way, my name is Holly." Raymond also introduced himself and was about to say goodbye when Holly suddenly invited him to drink hot tea. Raymond thought, why not? Holly's house was small but very cozy. A huge screaming cat greeted them at the door. "Well, don't swear. I'm going to feed you now," said Holly affectionately. "And you, sit down while I put the kettle on. I'll be in 5 minutes." "I'll wait, don't worry. Just feed the cat. Otherwise he'll eat you and me," joked Raymond. Holly laughed and headed into the kitchen, and Raymond decided to look around. His gaze slid from the television to the sofa, over to the old table, armchairs, and stopped at the wall, where there were pictures. He stepped closer to look at them and suddenly felt as if he'd been hit, and sticky sweat ran down his back. He stared and couldn't believe it, but there was no doubt. Mary was looking at him from the picture. She was sitting on a swing and she was holding a little girl, about 3 years old, apparently Holly. Raymond stood and the puzzle pieces gradually added up in his head. "Are you feeling bad?" asked Holly, noticing how pale the man was. "Holly, how old are you?" asked Raymond in a trembling voice. 23. "Is Mary your mother?" "Yes. Have you known her before?" wondered Holly. Raymond nodded and turned his eyes away. To break the awkward silence, he reminded her about the tea and Holly fussed. Sitting at the table, the man decided to ask her about how she'd been living all this time. Holly told him that while her mother was alive, of course it was easier to live, but even now she managed to cope. She used to work in the school cafeteria, and now she was on maternity leave. "When are you going to give birth?" asked Raymond thoughtfully. "The doctors say in a month," smiled Holly good-naturedly. Raymond finished his tea, said goodbye and drove away. His head was buzzing. He couldn't concentrate on the road and stopped. Dropping his head on the steering wheel, he thought about Holly and how his life had turned out. He dreamed of having children for years, but had never gotten one, and it turned out he had a grown-up daughter. Finally, Raymond decided that since he had done nothing for Holly in her childhood, he should be with her now to help with the upbringing of his grandson or granddaughter. When he returned home, Brooke was still awake. She tried to argue again, but Raymond silently walked past her into the bedroom and lay down. He didn't care about her. He had to think about what to do next. The next day, he talked to his boss and explained his situation. I found my daughter. Can you imagine? I can't work now. I have to be close to her." The boss was astonished. He'd known Raymond for a long time and was aware of his family problems. He couldn't stand Brooke either, and it was mutual. Thinking a while, the boss suggested that Raymond not quit his job, but take a leave of absence to begin with, and then decided what to do next. Raymond was packing when Brooke returned from the store. She asked her husband in surprise where he was going. "I'm leaving, for good," replied Raymond without looking at his wife. "Are you crazy?" said Brooke in amazement. "I don't know, but I was definitely crazy when I'd left Mary for you." Brooke, thinking that Raymond was going to Mary, shouted hysterically that she would not let him leave in peace. But Raymond, picking up his bags, headed for the door. "Mary is dead. I'm going to my daughter's house," he muttered, and at the door he turned around. "I'm filing for divorce and for division of property." Brooke silently sank back in her chair, unable to utter a word. Before driving out of town, Raymond drove through all the stores, stacking the car with everything Holly and her baby might need. A stroller, diapers, clothes. He bought everything. He didn't even forget about the cat and bought a huge bag of food. When he drove up to the house, Holly came out to meet him. "Holly, I need to tell you something." "No need. I guessed. You're my daddy, aren't you?" "Yes. I hope you won't kick me out," asked Raymond, looking hopefully at his daughter. "No, I've really missed you all these years." As Raymond began to bring his purchases into the house, Holly's eyes rounded. "Why so much? It's so expensive." But Raymond only smiled contentedly at her surprise. When it was time for Holly to return from the maternity ward, Raymond cleaned up the house. He was in high spirits, feeling young and full of energy. When he was getting ready to go to the maternity hospital, there was a knock on the door. On the threshold stood a young man with a large bouquet and asked for Holly. "Who are you?" asked Raymond. "I have some questions for you," replied the young man with a surprised look in his eyes. "I'm Holly's father, and you must be the coward who left my daughter." The young man blushed and, lowering his eyes, told Raymond that he had come to apologize for being afraid and for leaving. Raymond listened to him, smiled and said, "You can tell Holly everything yourself. Let's go. Your son was born."